It's so great to be here with all of you. I'm Alex Boris, Assembly Member of the 73rd District, and it's so hard to find these oases, the parks like this where people can come and get away from all of the grind of the city. And St. Vartan's Park Conservancy does such a great job building this up, preserving it, making an area for everyone else.
I'm City Council Member Keith Powers, I'm City Council Member representing this park, and I know how important this park is to this community. And since I've been here, we have invested millions and millions of dollars to make sure this park and this playground get all the investments it needs to be able to serve this community.
My name is Tricia Shimamura, and I'm so proud to be your new Manhattan Borough Commissioner for Parks. I was looking up a little history of St. Vartan's Park and curiously Googled who St. Vartan was. St. Vartan is a saint because of what he did to fight for the right for his community to worship, and essentially he was a fighter.
My name is Harvey Epstein. I'm the state assembly member here in the 74th District. Woo! Really, thank you. You know how important it is for people to have access to dirt and grass, and to be able to do that as a child and as an adult. Kevin, thank you for opening this space to all of us. This has been beautiful. It is something that gives back to our neighborhood.
Hi everyone, my name is Gonzalez. I'm the state senator here, but I'm also the youngest woman elected to the state senate. This is one of the most beautiful patches of green space that we have, when this is the most starved area in the entire borough for green space.
St. Vartan's is looking amazing today. I want you to know that I have been at events at Central Park and the High Line that have had fewer elected officials than this. I'm counting 6. St. Vartan's is a powerhouse.
This park is a much-needed green space, offering residents and visitors a respite from the constant activity of our bustling city. I want to take this opportunity to especially recognize Kevin O'Keefe. Kevin's outstanding service and leadership, his unwavering commitment to making green spaces public and accessible to the residents of Midtown East deserve special recognition. I will ask Kevin to join me as I happily present to him on this celebration of Earth Day this congressional record declaring his many accomplishments.
When we opened our doors to this conservancy 2 years ago, the first family that stepped up and made a donation was the Winfield family. Michelle Winfield is here. Can you come up? And my wife Kathy is here too, and I love you all so much. The reason I started the Conservancy is because I raised my kids here with Kathy, and we want to make sure it stays healthy and clean and beautiful.
My name is Kevin O'Keefe, and I'm the founder and president of St. Vartan Park Conservancy. I started the Conservancy really as the garden, as the impetus, but as we found it, our mission was not just the garden, was to improve the entire St. Vartan Park and its surrounding community. St. Vartan Park actually started as Civic Park. It started in 1904. That a lot of historians give it credit for having the first, as we know it, traditional playground slide. Soon after that, it was renamed St. Gabriel's. There used to be a St. Gabriel's Catholic Church over here where the Queens Midtown Tunnel is, so it no longer exists. One thing that I'm jealous of is this used to be a contiguous park. Now it's shaped like an exclamation point. The point in the exclamation point, that gap in there, is the entrance to the Queens Midtown Tunnel, the tunnel approach street. You know what's really interesting is I think a lot of people know Robert Moses, who is head of parks. He fought against this through street that is cut the park in two. He went on a cruise, Robert Moses, and the people that did want to have the through street, when he got on that cruise, they immediately started the wheels turning to change this within a couple days. So unfortunately, it was cut in two for the Queens Midtown Tunnel. What we have now is, on the west side of the park, basketball courts, handball court that's also used for pickleball. And then on this side of the park, we have the athletic field, playground, park building. And then as I mentioned earlier, garden. In the 1970s, once this cathedral here, St. Vartan's, was built, the St. Vartan Cathedral really became a greater part of this neighborhood. And so the city did decide to change the name to St. Vartan Park. So first of all, on behalf of St. Vartan Park Conservancy, we're so happy that you're here. We love that you're next door. And if you could introduce yourself to everyone.
I'm Christopher Zakian. I'm the communications director for the Eastern Diocese of the Armenian Church of America. Our headquarters is at the St. Vartan Cathedral complex. It's stood there since the 1960s.
It's so wonderful to have the golden cross and dome looking down over the park. Could you give us some history?
Well, the cathedral was the product of Armenian immigration to this country. Interestingly, there's a figure known as Martin the Armenian who arrived in this country in the 1600s. But really, Armenians started coming here in the late 19th century. Then in the 20th century, really in response to the great tragedy of the Armenian in the last century, the Armenian genocide, which depopulated the Ottoman Empire of its Armenian population in 1915 and following, large numbers of Armenians came to this country. Most of them came through Ellis Island. Throughout that period, there was a great desire to plant the Armenian church on the soil of the United States. That happened in 1891 in Worcester, Massachusetts, with the first Armenian church. And by the 20s and 30s, there was discussion of creating what they called a national home, a home for the nation. One cathedral that would sort of rally and represent all of these communities that had built up. That was the seed of St. Vartan Cathedral. And finally, in the early 60s, it became possible to build this edifice. In the background of it was the coming 50th anniversary of the Armenian genocide, which was going to be observed in 1965. There was a prior structure called the Diocesan House, designed by an architect named Zara Suryan. It was the first phase of construction. You can still see its bones when you view the cathedral. But the actual cathedral and its cultural center came up in around 1964. The community at the time undertook to hire a really prominent architect, Walker Kane, and he undertook this project with a lot of love in his heart. And he created this cathedral as sort of a reflection of styles of Armenian architecture that he felt were the authentic expressions of Armenian architecture. The cathedral was completed and consecrated in 1968. His Holiness Vasken I, sort of the Pope of the Armenian Church, came to America for that purpose. It was a big deal because Armenia was a Soviet Socialist Republic at the time. But this was an important occasion. The Catholicos came, consecrated the cathedral, consecrated it in the name of St. Vartan. St. Vartan was the first Armenian cathedral built in the New World. St. Vartan is a warrior saint who fought a war of liberation and freedom for the Armenian people 1,500 years ago, but he was a martyr for his cause. The cause was religious freedom. In some way, he represented the American spirit. St. Vartan was their tribute to the country that had adopted them, that had really rescued Armenians from total annihilation.
And his message resonated because of the liberty of this country and the parallel, is that?
Exactly right. I'll tell you about St. Vartan himself. You know, Armenia was a pagan country that has roots in deep, deep antiquity, centuries before Christ. The Armenian Church is one of the apostolic churches, which means that the Armenians were evangelized by disciples of Jesus Christ, apostles Thaddeus and Bartholomew. They came to Armenia in the first century, started a movement of Christianity, and really existed uneasily with the pagan authority. After 300 years, in the year 301, an important turning point occurred. The Armenian king of the time, King Dirtad, he precipitated a terrible crime, a massacre of Christian nuns who had come to the country. In his guilt was driven mad. None of the authorities of the day could cure him, but there was a Christian holy man who had been imprisoned for 13 years in a dungeon, who as a last resort was released, long story short, cured the king. The king in his gratitude converted to Christianity, and Armenia became, in that year, the world's first Christian kingdom in the year 301 AD. Within the century after Armenia's conversion, a new Armenian alphabet was created. The first time the Armenians had ever had an alphabet dedicated to their language. But because it was a Christian kingdom, and its neighbors were hostile to the Christian religion by and large, in the 5th century, the Persian King of Kings demanded that the Armenians embrace the official religion of the empire, which was Zoroastrianism. Armenians had served honorably and heroically in the Persian army, but this was a step too far. They couldn't renounce their religion. The ground was laid for a rebellion. Leading that rebellion was an Armenian nobleman, an elderly veteran of the Persian cavalry named Vartan Mamikonian. That's St. Vartan. And he led the Armenian forces against a vastly larger Persian military army in 451 AD in the northwest corner of Iran called the Plain of Avarai. By the end of the day of battle, he and 1,000 of his own officers were dead. Armenia eventually, though it lost the war, it did retain its Christian identity, which has endured until this day for the subsequent 1,500 years. Saint Vartan was a warrior who lost the physical battle and won a spiritual war, really. The great example of that in the cathedral is the cross atop the cathedral now, overlooking, New York City.
Can you talk a little bit about what you feel about the park?
It's a very beautiful park. It's a treasure to have it close to the cathedral. When I had very young children and they would come to visit me at work at the cathedral 20 years ago, we would come here and they would run around on the playground, and that's a delightful memory that I will never forget, and I know the people in this area really value it for that. It's a delight for me to see the little children running around today now.
More than 20 years ago, the Parks Department did allow the garden and this building that's in back of the playground. They gave it to one individual to run a play group. As it was found out later by the Parks Department, was a fee-based group. I felt that was elitist. This was a perfect example of how that garden and that building became a bastion of inequity. We did, after a lot of advocacy with the Parks Department, got them to say, you can have it open 7 days a week. Accessibility and inclusivity is important, but also the cleanliness and safety of those areas. Again, Conservancy opened up, we're stewarding the space. I look at other places too, like right here, yes, this open street on 36th Street should be open. We had a very successful trial a couple of years ago, but yes, it's something I fight for on a daily basis.
I actually have a similar story.
Just one person doing a power play?
Yeah, always.
So this garden, I'll give you the backstory. The garden was locked for decades, even though it's city land.
Right.
I was chair of the Environment and Parks Committee for Community Board 6.
Okay.
And I raised my kids in this park. I grew up in Murray Hill. And it's like, why the hell is this locked?
Yeah. It always starts with a good question. No, it really does.
Well, there's a New York Magazine story, a Curb story about what I did to make it open. Got a lot of the story. Tom Brady, the quarterback, is part of the story. Found out that they were renting the place out, and then one day found out this glorious picnic-style birthday party was for Tom Brady's son.
Oh, God, of course.
So we're still doing a lot of work on it, but
it's beautiful.
We've done events here. You're always welcome to look around. So I started the Conservancy 2 years ago once it got open because, of course, the question was, well, who's going to maintain it?
Always.
We are here a lot. When I say we, the St. Vartan Park Conservancy, really making sure that we understand what we're stewarding.
In thinking about the street space, there's always a lot of discussion of what's the best use. I see right now it's Parks vehicles, Fresh Direct on the other end, a parked over layover bus,
So our sort of dream really is this is open, but also open this street to make this an open street.
Right.
And then that MTA tunnel over the Midtown Tunnel, that's been locked for decades.
Yeah. Do you want to walk over to the street and break that down?
Yeah. So there's a water main project going on. That's why
on the far side here.
Trade guards, these eyesores are here, but also their storage yard is right here.
Okay. Yes.
But this is the open street that I should say, the street that we had that trial open street, which was glorious.
Oh, that's great.
We had Bike New York here that gave bicycle lessons to kids.
Right.
As we can even see now, this is not a heavily trafficked street.
Not at all. So there's such an opportunity here in saying, okay, well, let's just make this a continuous space because the traffic volume is so low, and then we can stand in the middle of the street here and, no one's coming.
Look at this. I mean, there's no vehicles at this point.
And there's wonderful overhead shade coverage.
Thank you.
And having this here, just this canopy is amazing.
Right.
It's almost cathedral-like with the way that it connects to the top. And so what's the next step in the vision in getting the open street back, in your opinion?
Well, it's really to work closely with DOT and get DOT. Now, one of the things we've heard, in one meeting was mentioned by somebody for an open street,
Yes.
tell me if this is true, needs to have a sponsor, somebody who lives on the street. That's a challenge here because there are no residents on this stretch of street. We're a conservancy, but we're also advocates, and we're advocates for more green spaces. So how do we make it happen? What do we do?
I think it's several things. I mean, I think it is one, going back to DOT and saying, hey, we want this back. Going to the community board similarly and saying, hey, we've done this. Get the Parks Department in here, get the Department of Transportation in here to hold them accountable for that. And then I think the elected officials.
Let's find the common ground to get this open.
Totally.
Recognize and admit that this is a space that's perfectly arranged for an open street.
Right.
Period. This playground is being redone. So Keith Powers, the first thing that he put money for when he became city council member was for a new playground. So that will close. Where do the kids go?
Yeah, maybe.
But this is begging
to be used.
And that's what the city needs to understand.
Yeah. I mean, I see lots
and the MTA
space.
space. So yeah, this is MTA space. It's been locked for a long, long time.
Okay.
It's never been open as far as I know. Again, I don't see any cars on this.
Right, nothing,
street.
just one coming.
Yeah. We clean it up when we have volunteer days. It's not cleaned up regularly.
Unbelievable.
So this could be a lot of things. I mean, we have so many ideas from the communities.
Absolutely. I mean, it's already wonderful.
So we were here over a year ago when we first started talking to Senator Gonzalez, and that's where she had the same reaction that you're having. Like, what? But this could easily be some seamless creation.
It's exciting.
As we grow and raise more money, this whole stretch can be its own space. It can have one name. What a great case study to show we did this with interagency Parks Department, DOT, MTA, working together.
Done and done. If only it was that simple.
I'm Kristen Gonzalez. I'm the state senator for Senate District 59, covering Western Queens, Northern Brooklyn, and the east side of Manhattan. So I was born and raised in Elmhurst, Queens. And, you know, there weren't a ton of green spaces, but our local park was one of the few spaces that we had for my own family to go on a weekend where we didn't necessarily have to spend money. And so I always had a love for parks and green space, just knowing them to be a pillar of a community, right? A lot of my own political learning and organizing history has been rooted in climate justice, but also just rooted in the baseline need for us to have clean air, green space, and places for New Yorkers to go where we don't have to spend money.
And I think also accessibility and inclusivity. Right?
I think we always need to have an eye for inclusivity and accessibility when it comes to our park spaces. One of the most surprising things I learned about our Senate District 59 is that in this part of Manhattan, we have one of the most starved communities for green space in the entire city. So I was really excited to see St. Vartan Park and the Conservancy really taking that issue on and advocating for our local park space, but also fighting for spaces like across the street that have been historically blocked off.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing up the MTA space. And just to be clear, there is a triangular piece of beautiful nature with trees and grass and bushes. It's right over the Queens Midtown Tunnel. Just like this garden was locked for decades to the general public, that locks out the general public. St. Vartan Park Conservancy volunteer team has said what we've done to this garden, all volunteer, we would do for that space as well. So that's not an excuse that the MTA won't have somebody that would keep up the space. You've seen some of the reasons why the MTA says we don't necessarily want that to happen. What can we do together, the Conservancy, the community, you, your team, to make this happen?
That's a great question. So I always advocate for organizing and being involved, having our voices heard. And so I see the role of our office as a partner and a support for the work that is already being done here on St. Vartan Park to engage local residents and bring them into this process. I know as an office, we're going to push the MTA on this. We've always believed that public land should stay in public hands and also be for the maximum public good. We don't have a ton of public land left in New York City. We'll certainly be working with with all of you, hoping that folks who are seeing this will join in on the fight. Because as you mentioned, there's beautiful green space right across the street, but gates shouldn't be the barrier that keeps us from it. And I think the last thing I also wanted to note that's really important is just what a long history St. Vartan Park has had in this community. You know, this park has been here since 1904. So one of my favorite things about St. Vartan Park is just how it feels like an oasis in a concrete jungle. So the way that it's designed, I think, is one of my favorite things. So I think the second part is the people that you see who are returning characters and the sense of community that you get when you walk in. But what it really shows is just there is history that we need to preserve here, and being able to expand that park or expand this park to a plot across the street will be part of that longer history and story in this neighborhood of us fighting, preserving, and celebrating our green spaces here. I feel like now we high five or something. We're like, yeah.
That was good. I'm City Councilmember Keith Powers, representing District 4 here on the east side of Manhattan.
Councilmember, you know this park well.
I do.
You probably remembered as a child, I'm guessing.
I do.
What are your best memories of St. Vartan Park?
Well, certainly where we're sitting right here today wasn't open, so we're now activated more space of it. And growing up and knowing this playground through most of my life, it's always been a big centerpiece of this community here in Kips Bay, Murray Hill. But also, we have activated it so much over the last 7 years I've been in office, including turfing it, updating the basketball courts, we're updating the playgrounds. We're trying to give it a lot more new life.
Why is open space with nature important in this part of the city?
Well, I think we have seen over the last few years how important these places are, just to get away from the city, even for a moment. But for for green spaces like the one we're sitting in right now, even for this area that we're sitting in, the green area, it's a nice little refuge away from the city, even though we're surrounded by Manhattan.
You've been such a great proponent and supporter and proponent of this park. Talk about the turf, because that's really changed the look, feel, and functionality of the park.
So many of our playgrounds, the ones I know from growing up that were where most people in this neighborhood were going to play, have always used concrete, unwelcoming, uninviting spaces. Sure, yes, plenty of opportunities to do things like play basketball and use them for purposes. Sometimes you have to adapt to your own behavior to play, baseball on concrete, things like that. But we had the simple revelation a few years ago. What if we actually activate these spaces to be more diverse, to be more comfortable and more supportive, but also activate uses that didn't make a lot of sense here in the past. So not only in St. Vartan's Park, but other parks around the east side, we have added turf to make them more modern and more inviting, honestly. And the days of driving past here and looking into this huge park and seeing people trying to make the best out of a concrete playground, those days are over. We now have made it so that you can really play soccer on here in the format you're supposed to be playing soccer here. We can invite recreational leagues in here and make it more diverse for people that live in this area. It was during COVID we had adapted to the strategy, which we did in a lot of areas, of creating new policies and strategies, which is to close down some of our city streets and invite people from the community to come out and use those spaces. In this particular instance, we saw a lot of open space with one street going through it and a neighboring school. It felt like it was such a good opportunity, and still is, to make this all about play and recreation and not have the street just going right through it. But we're still having engaged in that conversation, and we're going to try to activate as much space as we can in this area so families have as much space to use with a lot of diversity of uses.
The other spaces over the Queens Midtown Tunnel, again, what can the community do to make that potentially happen?
Sure, look, in a lot of these spaces, including the open streets, including the space you mentioned, we are trying to have a bigger imagination about spaces in our neighborhood. And Manhattanites, sometimes we're required to do that because we don't have the space that other places have, so we have to be bigger in our thinking, getting a city and state group together.
With your huge support, there's going to be a new playground. It's going to have more resiliency and many other features. Why was it important to get an updated playground?
This is the playground for the community here, but it's also a central point between people who live in Stuyvesant Town and Midtown. So it's always important you have updated space and you give the kids and the families something new, and you get so much excitement from families to go try out the new playgrounds and to offer something new to kids. I think for me, all the work I've done around St. Vartan's Park has been around making sure that the investment's happening for this neighborhood, because this is a really centerpiece to the surrounding area.
One of the things that's so important to the Conservancy is our future generation. Everybody want to leave legacy behind? Help the Conservancy or a group like us that can help make sure that the environment of the future is going to be strong.
Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. If you enjoyed this video,